As sea level increases, it no longer takes a strong storm or hurricane to cause high tide flooding.
By 2050, model projections foresee 85 flood days per
By
year.
2070, most climate models show it should flood every single day.
These are risk factors that insurers and global investors are already discussing.
These are things we need to think about. We're investing in our future, and this affects all of us in South Florida.
With the concern of sea level rise, the architect is challenged, to think a lot different in terms of the way that the building meets the grade and the way the building is going to be affected by water. So, how do we deal with an environment that is changing in a way that we hadn't seen before? In South Florida, being a coastal architect, I'm really more focused on the concern and the challenge that sea level rise brings to low-lying coastal communities like South Florida, Southeast Florida.
Resilient recovery after a hurricane, we have wind destruction, but we also have water destruction. Water destruction is very closely tied to sea level rise and flooding. So we have to find our way how to sort things out.
We created what we call the AIA Miami Sea Level Rise Task Force, which I'm chairing, and we've been doing that for about 4 years now. The focus of that task force has been really to bring the design mind together, to bring design thinkers in the community to think through the problem and the challenge of sea level rise and how we start to adapt, how we start to think of the future city and the current city in a different way. On a monthly basis, we try to bring conversation through forums and interactive gatherings with architects, planners, city leaders, policymakers, everyone that's really involved in affecting the way that we design the built environment. And we try to have conversation about what are we doing to really allow the architect, the planners, and the developers to build a more resilient city when it comes to the concern of water.
The name of our task force is Resilient Recovery. Our idea is to promote the construction or reconstruction of homes, of communities after natural disaster in a more resilient way so that the next hurricane season won't be doing the same thing again. But with time, people get comfortable and they forget that hurricanes do have very destructive power if they hit us. And then whatever organization that was placed at that point had disappeared. So our idea was to work with the Sea Level Task Force so we can combine efforts and move forward.
In the urban design and architecture world, we've been talking about elevating cities. And here we are in downtown Miami in the Brickell Avenue area with one of the largest buildings that we have. The Four Seasons Hotel is one of the most valuable buildings in this particular part of the neighborhood. This is sort of the tendency in the future, is to make sure that we're elevating high-rise buildings, because high-rise buildings cannot be raised, so that you have enough elevation at the ground floor so that the building could sustain the stresses of flooding, of storm surge, and eventually permanent flooding related to sea level rise. And I think the architect is well equipped, to be leading that conversation and making sure that we're designing a smart city and still, expand the life of a city like South Florida and Miami.
On your daily life, change is always difficult, no matter what kind of change we're talking about. So there is that kind of resistance or lack of momentum to push things forward, but I think it's getting better. It's getting looser, so there'll be more space for conversation. And I think as the cities take the forefront and they start having workshops and conferences on the subject and inviting the community to participate, I think you start bringing people to the same page.
We need to take immediate action. The city is composed of hundreds of buildings, but if hundreds of architects are all working towards the same objective, then it's a major impact on the environment. So I think architects need to remain hopeful. We need to stay on the frontier of thinking through things and problem solving in a way that is sensible, that it's driven by good ideas, but also by the economics of how the world is built.